customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DeJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to this week's episode of the Customer Service Revolution with John DeJulius. In this episode, John talks with Chief Johnny Jennings of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Chief Jennings has a unique vision for what type of police department he wants to build. Some have called it unrealistic that Jennings wants Charlotte to be known as the Chick-fil-A of police departments, but he is committed to making this vision a reality in one of the largest cities in America. In this episode, you'll learn why he has a vision to deliver world-class hospitality in their police department, that you can be for Black Lives Matter and have a tremendous amount of respect for what police officers do, how to change the stigma and rewrite the narrative of policing in the U.S., what a day in the life of a police officer is actually like, how to avoid empathy fatigue, and how their goal is to earn a genuine thank you and leave a positive impression even when they have to enforce the law. Now here's your host, John DeJulius.
Hello to episode number 38. This is John DeJulius, Chief Revolution Officer, and bringing you the Customer Service Revolution podcast. Today, I'm so excited to be having a true disruptor, someone who is revolutionizing an industry that is, probably overdue for it. That is Chief Johnny Jennings. Welcome, Chief.
Hey, welcome, John. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited because to me, you are a visionary. You're looking so far out, and I can't wait for my listeners to hear what you're doing and how you're reinventing policing. Chief Jennings is the chief of police in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, which is one of the largest police departments on the East Coast. Charlotte, if you don't know, has grown to be the 15th largest city in the U.S. I want to go to your background. You grew up, you went to Jefferson, right?
Yeah, Jefferson County in Tennessee. It's in the northeast Tennessee and up near the Tri-Cities.
And that is Dandridge. Is that correct?
Dandridge, yes, Dandridge. That's correct. Yes.
All right, so my first question for you, if it's true, Dandridge is a dry town.
Jefferson County, Dandridge is where my high school is.
Yeah.
Jefferson County is the county, and I lived in Jefferson City. So the Dandridge part, I can't tell you if it's a dry town or not. I don't know. I've never tried to buy anything there. Okay. I was too young when I was there.
Well, yeah, you were too young. I didn't know if that was motivation to get out of there really quick. Okay, and then you went and graduated from Appalachian State University, where you are inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Athletic Hall of Fame for, I believe you were a linebacker for the football team. Is that correct?
I was, and I'm going to make sure so my people don't get mad. It's Appalachian, and whenever they hear Appalachian, it doesn't go over very well. So Appalachian,
which one of their famous things beat Michigan about 6 or 7 years ago.
That was a historic moment, but what a great school, what a great experience I had there. I couldn't have been happier to choose that school and to play football there and to get my education there. So it was a great experience.
And you still look like you could get back on that field and play some. So,
well, my body would tell you otherwise. If I took a hit right now, I might be out of commission for a while.
And how many police chiefs have there been in Charlotte over the history? About?
Oh, wow. So we started out the Charlotte Police Department, and then there was the Mecklenburg County Police Department. In 1995, those two merged together and became the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. And I think as the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, I want to say there's probably been 7 or 8 police chiefs.
Okay.
And then as Charlotte, before that, I couldn't even tell you the number, but, there was this long stint of police chiefs that spent several years of their career as the chief, unlike now where, a lot of chiefs are, 5, 7, 8 years and it's time to move on and retire and do something else.
Well, in July of 2020, just a little less than a year, you were named chief of police of Charlotte, and I believe you were the 3rd African-American police chief Charlotte has ever had.
That's correct. Yes. Yes.
Great. And so, I want to get into it. Your vision, which is going to, really blow people's mind, is to bring a world-class hospitality culture to Charlotte and policing. And, I've heard you say you want to be the Chick-fil-A of police departments. Tell us about that vision and what made you have that vision.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I was sitting around and we were, the whole time I was thinking, what do I want this police department or what do I want policing to look like here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg? And, the first thing that popped in my mind is that, hey, we are providing a service. The citizens are our customers. So why can't we look at a customer service base to make sure that we're serving our citizens in a professional and courteous manner? And the one thing I thought, and I talked to my team about it, my deputy chiefs, and I said, think about it. You go into Chick-fil-A and the employees there, they always are polite, they're friendly, the food is consistent. So when you leave there, you have a good feeling about your interactions with them. So why can't we look at that and say we want to provide that customer service to our citizens so that when we leave, it's that we've given them a good feeling about their interaction with the police as best as we possibly can. That doesn't mean that if somebody's shooting a gun at you, you're going to go and try to, hug them or be polite with them. It means that we are going to do our part in ensuring that interaction is done in a professional and courteous manner. And it just so happened that somebody that was in the meeting when I made that comment that said that they had your contact and that you were involved in that training. I said, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And that's what I want. So we got the ball rolling and here we are today.
Yeah, and it's great. It's been so rewarding. We're only early on to our work, and it has just been such a learning curve to see what everyone goes through, your sworn officers, your non-sworn civilians that work there. And we're going to talk about that. Why did you personally get into the police work?
Well, I wish I had an exciting story behind that, but I originally got into it because it was a job, and I'll explain that a little bit. So in the early 90s, when I graduated from Appalachian State, the advice that I was given was Charlotte is an up-and-coming city, and it's a great place for a young college student that's looking for a job to find career opportunities. But we were in the middle of a recession, and there were very few companies that were hiring. When I originally majored in criminal justice, I anticipated being a postal inspector someday. And that proved to be very difficult back then to get in with the Postal Service. And a friend of mine simply talked me into applying for the Charlotte Police Department, which I did. The first thing I said was, I don't want to be a cop. I'll apply, but I don't want to do this, thinking that I would probably get something else prior to it and not have to worry about it. So
it was a fallback job originally.
It was a fallback. I never had any intentions on being a police officer ever. And so how it worked out for me is when they started calling me, doing my background investigation, and the more I was talking with them and the more I did research on it and realized that policing is not just what's on the surface and what you see on TV. And I actually talked to several police officers about, what's available within the department. And, by the end of it, I was excited and ready to join and thought that, there are so many careers within this career that it's just amazing that you can have another job. You can have a different job every year, and move around the department, and it keeps things interesting.
Yeah. So you've been in it nearly 30 years at every level, at the highest level now. How has it evolved? Has it evolved enough from both sides of the fence?
Oh, it absolutely has evolved. And there's been probably more than one cycle of evolution that I've been through as a police officer. But, the biggest difference I tell people now that I see is when we deal with crime in different areas. In the past, it was, well, we have to do a no tolerance approach and go in and arrest as many people as you can, make as many traffic stops, enforce was beaten over the head with these officers when you talk about the crime hotspots, as we called them. And so not that there was ever any quotas or anything, but if you were assigned to one of these locations, you were expected that you were going to make arrests and you were going to write tickets and get out with people for the purpose of taking them to jail, whether it's a minor offense or not. Over the time, what we've evolved to today is you see a lot of programs and things that we're doing to try and keep people out of the criminal justice system and out of that cycle that we don't have to deal with them on a criminal level. And our diversion programs and youth programs and things that we are doing to make people more productive citizens in society. And we realize that we can arrest our way out of crime issues. We've been trying that for years. And the same crimes hotspots that we dealt with 30 years ago are the same ones we're dealing with today. So we have to take a different approach.
Yeah. So I always feel like, earlier, well, it was probably last August, September, I did a podcast on Black Lives Matter. And, I got a little flack from, people thinking I was dissing police. And so then you're addressing the having this interview and working with the police. And I don't want anybody to think that it has to be either or, where you're choosing one or the other. And going with your vision of providing a world-class hospitality policing department in your community, how much does that have to do with the past 12 months of the crazy media publication, publicizing all the Black Lives Matter stuff? Where does that fit in?
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I first was told I was going to be the next police chief, that was prior to the George Floyd incident and the uprisings that we saw. I had a plan that would keep us consistent with our former chief to continue on some of the great things that had been done over the past 3 or 4 years that he was the chief. And how do we keep that consistent? Well, when the George Floyd incidents occurred, I had to do a total 180 and take another look at what do I want my vision to be. And, one of the big things that came out of that for me was, we have to initiate a form of community collaboration within our police department. And what that means is that there doesn't have to be an us versus them. We need to be able to combine the efforts of the community and the police, and let's come together and come to the table and figure out, how do you want to be police? One of my sayings that I've said multiple times is that the police, the citizens give us the authority and the power to police. So the police should get input from the community on how they want to be policed. Obviously, that's within reason and within laws, the laws and the Constitution and everything else. But at the same point, we have to be able to bring them to the table and say, well, what do you want from your police agency? And that goes along with the customer service concept that I've been talking about throughout this time.
So what do you say to the skeptics that I'm sure are going to be out there as this starts getting more and more notoriety, before they may see tangible results, that this is just a PR stunt?
Well, you have to show that it's not a PR stunt through the actions. A lot of the things that we put forth within our police department, things that we're doing now, including, our investment in customer service, that's not a PR stunt. That's us actually wanting to change the culture of this organization. And we have to prove that's what we're going to do. If I say that we're going to provide better customer service and we're going to take an out of the box approach to doing that, then that has to be something tangible out there down the road that people see that and understand that we're making those efforts and that we're changing that culture. So, it's funny how we're in such an unforgiving society that you're either one way or the other, and there's no middle ground. Yeah, and there's a lot of people who feel that way now. Just like you mentioned, if you do a podcast for Black Lives Matter, then that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't like police. And it's same vice versa. As you're interviewing me now, that doesn't mean that you're against the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. So there's room, and what that's done for us is allowed us to stop and take a pause and say, we really need to listen. And both sides need to be able to come to the table. Otherwise, you're spinning your wheels. If you're continuously battling against each other, we're going to look back in 10 years and we're going to be in the same situation. But if we come to the table and discuss how do we work together and how do we make substantial changes, then we're going to make a whole lot of progress and be a lot more understanding when an officer makes a mistake and we hold that officer accountable. Let's not broad stroke the entire organization or the entire profession as villains. And let's understand that we're human beings just like anyone else.
And, when I tell people about my work, with the Charlotte Police Department, the first thing they say, not knowing Charlotte, just when they hear the word police department is, they need it. And, yeah. I always say, there's bad eggs in everything, right? Yeah. There's bad eggs in politics. There's bad lawyers out there, teachers, I think, hopefully well more than 95, even 98% are really good. We all have, bad eggs that we always have to be, relentless about, filtering and doing everything we can, coaching up or coaching out. But it is unfortunate that right now the media is loving to show the 2% of the police work.
And that's unfortunate because that, to me, that sells. You can put out great work that our officers are doing every day and life-saving events that they're involved in. And if it gets a blip on the news, then that's almost a win for us. But if you put an officer doing a bad thing that stepped out of the boundaries of the profession and the expectations of the profession, then you're going to get weeks of coverage a lot of times on that. That's what's the most concerning for police chiefs is that we're now accountable not just for our own agencies. We have to really hope that nothing across the country happens, because you've seen that something can happen in an entirely different state and it's going to affect your profession here locally. And that's what we have to look out for. And, it's unfortunate a lot because, like you said, we're human beings. You can't expect a profession to never step out of bounds or make a mistake. We know that's going to happen, but you don't categorize any other profession. Like if you mentioned some of the other bad doctors, there are bad pastors out there. If one pastor steps out of line, we don't say that all pastors are bad. Or one doctor steps out of line that all doctors are bad. But for some reason, that stigma sticks with this profession. And then if you entirely judge what policing is about and who we are based on what you see in the media, then it does. There's so much vilification that goes on publicly and not enough of the good stuff that we do. And that's what I wish we could change that narrative a little bit.
And you are. I mean, I'm proof. I see it firsthand. It's not like you just signed one day come in, give us a pep talk, and then we can publicize that we work with the same consultant that the Ritz-Carlton or Chick-fil-A does. You've signed a long-term, intensive agreement to make sure that you're going to be a pioneer. And I believe not only will you be leading the new narrative in policing, I think other industries are going to look at what you're doing. So something that I've really, it's just been, I've always had a great appreciation for police work. I don't know what this says about me, but it's something I wouldn't do, and I'm, quite frankly, a little embarrassed to say that, it's tough work. And most of what I've seen has been in the movies. And I think it's embellished until now I get involved and I'm working with your teams every day. And it's just an aha. So I want you to help me, or help my audiences first realize what a day in the life of a police officer can look like, from their call to call, the type of situations they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you hit on a great point too, because when even going through the academy and my first day out with my training officer was absolutely 100% different than what I had envisioned throughout my entire life about what policing was about. And it wasn't until I got out there and realized that, there's a lot of paperwork involved. There's a lot of sitting around involved in patrolling, riding around, just being the eyes of the community. But then all of a sudden, things will go 100 miles an hour. You could have a half a shift where you don't get a call for service, and you might stop a few cars, or you might get out and talk to a few people. And then all of a sudden, you're fighting a guy with a gun. How do you mentally prepare yourself for that as an officer? And that's where we have to also look at the mental health and the well-being of our officers as well, because you're going from 0 to 100 back to 0, and then you go home, and how do you shut that down? How do you shut that off when you're not at work? So any typical day, you start out your day as a patrol officer. If you're a patrol officer, you're probably with your peers and talking at a roll call or getting ready to go out to your shift. And then all of a sudden, you're taking on calls, and you don't know what those calls are going to be. It could be a traffic accident. It could be a medical emergency, or it could be someone with a gun or something, drug dealers, or that's what you can't control out there. So when you talk about the day in the life of a police officer, it's all over the map. You may go a whole week without any dangerous situation that you've been involved in. And then all of a sudden you're involved in life or death situations. You may be dealing with calls for service that are really hard to get out of your mind, whether it's a homicide, domestic violence, child abuse, all those things that you see that as a human being and a citizen might be your worst possible moment in your entire life. And police officers are seeing that daily and dealing with that daily. So that's kind of hard to shut off. And that's why you have to be really intentional about your employee wellness. As a leader in this department, I have to make sure that our officers are taken care of mentally, as well as having the equipment and tools to do their job.
And that's it. We, the first thing we do with all our consulting clients is we help them create a day in the life of their customer. And, a day in the life of me back in normal times might be, my plane is delayed, or, my son didn't get the test results he was hoping for, or he didn't take out the rubbish, and I'm annoyed with that. Right. Or, and on the grand scheme of things, these things are minor, but interviewing your staff, I'm finding out that they can have, their first call can be an overdose, and their next call could be a domestic violence. And then, it could be, a death notice of letting parents know that, their teenager was involved in an accident, and they haven't even had their lunch yet. Right. Yeah. And it's amazing. And, police aren't celebrated at the level that they should be. They deserve to be put on the same level as people that are serving and that have served. And one of the quotes that I love is, and that you just kind of really said, was police are at their best when things are at their worst. And,
Yes.
That's just incredible. And so how do you reduce? So we've talked about all the things that a police officer could be seeing. They're seeing some ugliness that, again, in my bubble, I see in movies. I don't really think they exist. I think it's Hollywood amping it up. But police are seeing it, on a regular basis, at its ugliest. And then, with the narrative that we've talked about, the media is jumping on and exaggerating and making it sound like it's, all of them, when it's only a very small percentage. How do you avoid both being a police officer and then being a leader of so many, of 2,400 employees at Charlotte, them not taking on that victim mentality that, woe is me, this isn't fair? Because that's an easy thing to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, let me first just be clear that I have no issue with accountability. So yeah, I understand that the media, they're not going to get high ratings for putting out that, hey, an officer helped a lady across the street this afternoon, or that even officers that do heroic things.
I've read stories from your team that they took someone to Target to get them car seats, because they didn't have their child in a car seat, and they could have written them a ticket or realized that they can't afford a car seat.
And John, that's almost a weekly, daily thing. And we actually have funds that are donated funds that are set aside to do things like that for people we come in contact with. That's not a big news story, though. But and I guess it's what the demands for the public are that drives what the media puts out there. And, we have to create our own narrative on some of this. And that's why we've done some things with our social media platform to make sure that we're pushing those good stories out and telling people who we are as an agency and trying to at least combat some of the narrative that we're not in control of. You'll see things that are put out that are edited in a way that are intentional to make the officers look bad. So we want to put the entire story out there. I think one of the biggest mistakes that agencies make is when they don't put the narrative out there when they have major issues and to basically have no comments. Now, you don't want to ever jeopardize the integrity of an investigation. Right. But I've seen a lot of cases where, why don't they just say this, or why don't they just say that there was a gun on the suspect, or he had a knife, or she had a knife. And sometimes we tend to kind of hold close to the vest of anything and not say anything with the media. The media can be the worst part of the case, or it can actually help you out. And if you give them information rather than having them go and find their own information, that helps you control it a little bit more.
Yeah, no, 100% right.
If you had 15 minutes with John DeJulius, what would you ask him? We want to know. This is Denise Thompson, managing partner of the DeJulius Group, and I invite you to contact us at thedejuliusgroup.com with your questions, or write them under reviews, and we'll address them on future episodes.
So learning and working, with your team, I've noticed, so there's a lot of industries that can have empathy fatigue, and empathy fatigue is defined as dealing with a high percentage of customers who like oncology or behavioral therapy or funeral directors, right? I mean, everyone you're dealing with is kind of, at their worst state. Now, what I've from my research working with your teams, I kind of see three causes of empathy fatigue that can take place. First, as we said, you could just become numb, because everyone you're dealing with it's in a bad spot, and after a while it's not as oh my God anymore. I mean, what you're dealing with for the fifth time today, I may have not dealt with in 5 years.
Yeah.
And then the second one is what I call is your police could be dealing with someone whose interaction pales in comparison to their last one, right? So you just, had to, give a death notice to parents about their teenage daughter or son, or God forbid. And now they're coming to my house because my laptop got stolen out of my driveway, out of my car. And yeah, that's a legit, but I could be having a meltdown saying, oh my God, you have no idea how this is going to affect. And if I was that police officer coming from, what they just came from, that's really hard to have empathy for someone who pales comparison. And then the third one I really learned from working with you and your team is, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you're dealing with the same 20% of suspects or offenders who, this is the third time this week. You may be called to their house, or you may be talking to them because they're selling something they shouldn't be selling or whatever. And that has to get old, because I know, I feel nothing is going to get through to you. I mean, this is, we've had this conversation, or you've been arrested umpteen times. So that's really tough. And I don't know how that gets addressed, How do you?
I think part of it is the work we're doing with you, John. If you look at Chick-fil-A, they serve thousands of customers, and that same fatigue could be. I've dealt with all these customers all day, and I'm getting tired of dealing with them. And how do they not do it? Or Disney, look at the hundreds of thousands of people that go through Disney. Every greeting that you have with them is like it's their first one. And you and I also spoke Ritz-Carlton, same thing. So it's not an excuse to have the empathy fatigue, but how do you get your officers to not let that affect how they interact with someone? And you're absolutely right. I've had complaints to where the excuse for the officer was, hey, I just came from a homicide scene, and this person's worried about a bicycle getting stolen. I didn't have time to listen to them. And that's not an excuse. And until you're on the other side of that, which I have been, you don't realize, I give an example that I had my shed broken into one time as an officer, and I called 911, and they wanted to take a report over the phone. And I said, I wanted them to come out and take fingerprints and shoe markings, and I wanted the full gamut of the investigation. And I had a weed eater and a blower stolen. Right. So when you feel it on that other end, right, it makes you mad, and it really is something that it's one of your worst moments, that now somebody who might have seen a child abuse case or a domestic violence case or a homicide, now you expect them to give you that same service because you had a weed eater stolen. How do we instill that in our officers? And that's what I'm trying to do.
And that's what you're doing a great job of, because you've committed to, creating the day in the life of, a Charlotte-Mecklenburg citizen, and
yes,
and getting your entire team, 2,400 employees at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, to understand that, yes, while that mom's son's bike got stolen, okay, she saved up, for 6 months to be able to afford that bike.
Exactly.
She's a single mom.
Yes.
And she finally was able to give it, and to her son, that was better than a trip to Disney, because a trip to Disney is not even on the realm of possibilities. And, we take that for granted, and we take for granted, the parents of someone who is chronically getting in trouble.
That's correct.
And having empathy for them, and trying to say, I've heard you say this, relate and say, I'm a parent too. And, I can only, fathom how bad you feel right now. And we're going to do everything we can to help him. And that's what I love that you're doing for your teams, in every department, so they better understand the plight that their people are going through.
That's right. And, those interactions are, they're cumulative. So the way you interact, I tell my officers that how you interact with an individual will likely make it easier if you interact appropriately, is going to make it easier for the next officer that has that same interaction, has a different interaction with that individual. And potentially it could go all the way up to saving the life of one of your peers that interacts with this individual. If you treat somebody with fairness and respect, then that's what the expectation they're going to have the next time they have an encounter. If you treat somebody poorly, then it's twofold.
Feeding the stereotype.
It is.
That the police are out to get me, and they're just, and you tell a great story, Chief. I've heard you tell this a couple times, and I don't know, it was a study or research of a known cop killer. Yes. And he chose not to kill a cop. Hopefully I'm saying it right, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, when you go through the police academy, there's a few things that stick with you for forever. And this story is one of them, that there was a known cop killer that was stopped by a police officer while he was fleeing the state, or he may have been in another state, but he was stopped on a traffic stop. That suspect had his gun under his arm with his arms crossed in the car as the officer spoke with him. And when he wrote him a ticket and let him go. And then when they interviewed him later on, and they noticed that when they talked about his traffic stop, they asked him the question, why didn't you kill that officer? And he said, the officer was so polite and so sharp looking. His uniform was put together. He was professional. He said, I just couldn't do it. And that's one of the things that I was told in the academy. Your appearance in and of itself may save your life one day. How you talk with somebody in and of itself may save your life or keep you from having to take a life one day. And those are the things that resonates to me when I was in the police academy, that I said, this is important. And I've told people a couple things, even going through the ranks or even as an officer, I said, your gun and your badge is not a ticket to disrespect someone. First of all, I said, so you always have to treat people and talk with people, carry yourself as if there's a camera on you all the time. Now think about that. I used to say that 25, 26 years ago. Little did I know that at some point, policing would involve a camera on you all the time, not just your body-worn camera, but everybody has a cell phone that's videoing any interaction that you have, and they get an opportunity to video.
Yeah, it's crazy. But one of the things, to that, you're talking about your actions as an officer can save, the next interaction for an officer. But another thing, working with your team and in the workshops, that something came out it was a really aha moment. It was an aha moment for me, but you're actually providing, as a police department, as police officers, you're actually providing world-class customer service when you do, in fact, enforce the law. To me, it's not about you're providing world-class service saying, all right, I'm going to let you go this time. Now, that is a judgment call, and there's a lot of things that take into place. But, the way I see that is, I want someone to ticket my son if he's speeding, 40 or 50 on a side street, because there's so many ramifications for that. If he doesn't get ticketed, if he doesn't get stopped, and he thinks he could do this all the time, well, that 40 will turn into 55, and it'll turn into, maybe he's doing it, at 11:30 p.m. Now he's doing it at 11:30 a.m. And something could happen to him, and worse, something could happen to a child playing on the street. And that's world class to me, is making Charlotte-Mecklenburg County a safe place to raise my family, to live in that area. So I think it's also important that world class just isn't saying, hey, I'm going to look the other way today.
Yeah. A lot of it is accountability on the people, so if you are doing something wrong and the police hold you accountable for it, then we're doing our job. Now, the whole concept is not to leave that impression that we have, or that interaction that we have, as if we've done something to an individual. but to make sure that that individual knows that they've done something that they're being held accountable for, but their interaction with us doesn't have to be contentious. They can leave us and say, you know what, I did wrong. The officer did his job or her job and did what they were supposed to do. This is on me. That's idealistic, I know, and it's not always going to be like that. There are a lot of times when just the mere interaction, the presence of the officer causes conflict, and people will cuss you out just because you're in a uniform. But at the same time, we don't need to be the ones to escalate that. We're professionals, and that's what we're getting paid to do. And we're gonna hold people accountable, and we're gonna hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that any police department, any officer has, and even the civilians that work at the police department is not mirroring the attitude that you're getting back. Because I'll do that. If I think the cashier at the grocery store is giving me attitude, I could snap back, and usually I'm, embarrassed that I would do something like that. But now you got someone who, is intense and is using language, inflammatory language. And, but so just to recap now, because this is really where I think you're disrupting and revolutionizing the future and going to change the narrative. So we've made it clear that the vast majority of an interaction with a police department is usually negative, right? They're pulling me over. Maybe I don't have for minor infractions. I was speeding, or my license plates don't have the renewal tag on them too. Whatever that may be, and so, but you're talking about launching something where everyone on your staff, whether I'm coming to get a dog license, I'm coming to fill out a police report of stolen property, or I'm getting pulled over and getting a ticket. You want your team to find a way to earn a thank you and leave a positive impression. And, when I tell people that at first, they're like, really? Like, yeah. But then let's talk about their jobs. I mean, handing me a ticket and me, giving you a thank you. Like, if you could do that, that is mind-boggling perception. And one of the things I love, the story that you tell is you got 2 tickets when you were younger. And the first one, you were mad at the cop, and probably like any typical young person was like, he was an SOB. He didn't have to do that to me. And the second one was so professional, treated you with so much respect, still gave you the ticket, but instead of being mad at him, you were mad at yourself for speeding.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to get at and say, the experience doesn't have to be positive. There's nothing positive about me getting a ticket, but the interaction can be positive. So the interaction with that second officer was positive because he was polite, he was professional. And for lack of a better term, the first ticket I got, the officer was a jerk. Getting that ticket, it was more me focusing on him being a jerk and blaming him. So what do I say now, even to this day, about not just that officer, but he was reflective upon that entire department. So I would easily say, if I was never to become an officer, to say, heck, the officers in that town are all jerks. I wouldn't even go through there. But the other one said, oh, those are some friendly officers. They're professional and they're polite to you. So those single interactions that I had lay judgment upon that entire police department. And that's the thing that I try to say we shouldn't be doing, is broad stroking the entire profession or department based on what you might see in the media or what you might have an experience with one of those officers. So that's just, it's so powerful. Your interaction alone, although you may have many of them per day, that one interaction with that individual is more powerful than you can even realize for future. I mean, that was 40 years ago, and I still remember them like they're yesterday.
And like you've pointed out to me, and it made me realize, I may come in contact with an officer once, every 5 to 10 years. But whatever that interaction is, that brands me as they're all jerks or they're really good guys, right? And I'm not saying, well, no, it's the one guy in Aurora. No, I'm broad stroking it. And I love that, to earn a genuine thank you and leave a positive impression in your world, that causes pause. You really have to think about that. How am I going to still enforce the law? But and some of the pillars that you guys are working on is making sure that when you enforce the law or when you have any interaction, you educate them on the why behind this. It's in the best interest of the community and you and your safety and my kids and your kids, and show empathy that it's not just like you also don't want to broad stroke people and just think this is what they deserve. And then the empowerment, which goes back to your funding and the ability that you encourage your police officers to be daymakers, and that's such an incredible thing. And I do believe that you encourage all your employees to be daymakers when the opportunity presents itself really has a major impact on their wellness. Because I always say, if I paid a guy's toll behind me that I've never met before, or if I see a meter about to expire on the street and I throw a quarter in it to save the guy, maybe getting a ticket, I was a day maker.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the person who feels the best is the day maker. Right. Yeah. And so you're giving your employees that chance where they get to go home and say, I did something really positive today. And I think that's genius.
It's a good feeling when you do something positive for somebody else. It gives you a good feeling. And you brought up a good point, too, that you kind of hit on, that this isn't just about how we treat the people we come in contact with for calls or even the people that we come in contact with because we just want to get out and talk with them. This is how we treat each other as an organization as well, because we deal with a lot externally. We shouldn't be dealing with issues internally when it comes to interacting with our peers, our supervisors. Now, you have to walk that fine line of accountability, but at the same time, I never want somebody not wanting to come to work because of who their boss is and because their boss gives them a hard time. That's not justified for that. But you still have to make sure that you're holding your people accountable. But there's also ways to do that and to treat people fairly and respectfully internal also.
And I don't think it stops there, Chief. In our definition for a customer service revolution is, to create a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform the way employees and customers, what they experience. And this transforms into their life, at home and in the community. Yes. And if you really think about this is going to have an impact on your 2,400 employees, because even listening to you, when I think about the two pillars, educate and empathize. Well, when I got to tell my son that he's grounded, right? I could do that stoic. I could say, hey, you should have, thought before. Now, if I educate him, and do show empathy that I know this is the last thing you want, but, and he still's grounded, I think I'm going to get a lot further than, just being dad laying down the law.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about education, people having an understanding of why this consequence is so important to put forth and to lay down, like you said, lay down the law. Why is it important? Instead of just saying, you did X, Y, Z, you're grounded for a month. This is why I feel like you need to be grounded for a month, because this is to protect you for whatever reason. And so a lot of times we tend to do something without explanation. And you go back to the old, I guess, the Dragnet movies, Just the Facts, Ma'am. Those are things that we have to be careful with as officers, because even I told you my first day out as a police officer was totally different than what I had imagined it was going to be. And this is even after going through the academy, because maybe some of what I picked up over the years of what being a police officer is about is what I've seen in the media or what I've seen on movies and on television shows. And when I realized that it's not like that, then I had to refocus on what my career was going to look like and what my profession looked like at that point. So it's kind of convoluted in a sense, but it's one of those things that we have to be cautious of as a profession.
Yeah, a couple of quick questions here for the two percenters, the ones that have really made bad decisions in the industry. Is that a product, of poor hiring or burnout?
No, first of all, I don't think it's poor hiring because it's such a small fraction, right? Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department hires about 4% of its applicants. So the scrutiny of the process is great, and probably, honestly, probably too great that we're actually looking at things where why is it just 4%? Or why are we only hiring 4%? Where are we missing out on some potentially good candidates? So what we have to make sure of is that we're bringing the right people in. And that's difficult to do. You're talking about an agency with, we're allocated almost 2,000 police officers. And if we, out of those 2,000, you cannot expect, we're not robots. So somebody's going to step out of bounds at some point. So what I try to tell people is it's not necessarily what the officers might do, but how do we hold them accountable and also to assure that that same action is not repeated either by that officer or another officer. And I think that's important. But if people are going to sit and expect us to never have any controversial incidents or encounters with police officers, then you're going to be waiting for a long time. Because, like I said, until you have a world of robo-cops, that's not going to happen.
You have two college-age kids, and if they come to you tomorrow and say, I want to go into police work, or I want to spend the rest of my life with someone that will, what's your first instinct?
I've hoped that I've instilled my kids to be their own men. That when they come to me with something like that it's something that they've that they thought out, and they weighed the pros and cons of it, and I would fully support them. I would not only support them, I'd be proud of the fact that they chose a career and a profession that is challenging, and knowing what those challenges are, particularly with me being in that profession, that I would support them fully if that's what they wanted to do. So my parents did the same with me. I try to let them make their own decisions. They're well informed of what my career has been and what the challenges have been. And if they come and say this is what they want to do, then I stand behind that.
Did you have good parents and you have great values? Is that where it came from?
I think so. Absolutely. My parents were always there. Like you said, playing sports. I don't think they ever missed a single event that I was involved in, or major events that accomplishments that I've had. They've always allowed me to make my own decisions, from where I went to college to whether I wanted to play a sport or not play a sport, to even being calling my parents saying, hey, I think I want to be a police officer. They've always allowed that freedom and trusted in me, that they knew that there was a point where they've done what they can with me, and now they just have to hope and sit back and hope that it all took, and I think it did. So
I think so too. Chief Jennings, 30 years, you've had already a remarkable career. I think it's safe to say that what you're about to embark on and what you're doing as the chief is going to even put a bigger legacy. What do you want your legacy to be when it's all said and done professionally?
That answer would have been different a year ago. But I think right now, my legacy, I would like to leave, and people say that I revolutionized the way the police interact with the public now, and that I have changed the narrative from us versus them to it's all us, it's citizens and it's the police, and that those relationships are strong, that they're to a point to where that we're all accountable for each other, and that we work together on things. So community collaboration, one of the core values that I want to instill in this department. And if I can get away, and if anything else, if I leave here and we can say that the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department has really changed their culture into providing customer service to their citizens, then I would be a very happy person in retirement and feel a great sense of accomplishment just by doing that.
Well, getting to see your commitment firsthand to your vision, the people you surround yourself with, these aren't just words you're putting up there. These aren't platitudes. You have a strategy behind it. I am very proud. I've learned so much from you. To me, you will be known as the Walt Disney of police work. And, I can't thank you enough for what you do and the role you play. It's critical, and I believe it's going to be a model that every police department will want to replicate in the next decade. So thank you so much, Chief.
John, thank you. And again, you have really brought my vision to the forefront, and I couldn't be happier with our decision to start the conversations with you and work with you. And I know we're not done yet, and I look forward to moving forward and continuing this dialogue that you and I have. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for listening to episode 38 of the Customer Service Revolution, and we will see you on episode 39.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give the Customer Service Revolution podcast a thumbs up and write us a review. To hear more episodes, subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening and for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.